There are truths that never get mentioned in the doctor's office. No physician will voluntarily tell you. No medical brochure brings it up. And you won't find it posted on the walls of any hospital either. But if you've already turned 70, this is something you need to know before it's too late. Every year, millions of seniors line up for routine health checkups, believing the more tests they take, the healthier they'll stay. But here's what most people don't realize. Some of those very common tests can become a double-edged sword, quietly pulling older adults into a cycle of pills, side effects, stress, and treatments they never really needed. Did you know that, according to the latest stats, out of every 100 seniors who get tested, 37 end up being overtreated? That means nearly 1/3 are facing the consequences of being too careful. Even worse, there's one test on this list, meant to prevent cancer, that actually contributes to 5% of all cancer cases in the US every year. Yes, you heard that right. A test designed to prevent disease is sometimes what causes it. It's not just a medical paradox. It's the price we pay when fear drives our decisions instead of knowledge. Hi there, and welcome to Life Tips. After 60, a channel where we talk about the things your doctor might not mention and give you a different perspective to help you live healthier, more confidently, and more peacefully in your golden years. If you find today's message helpful, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so we can keep creating meaningful videos just like this. Now picture this. An older person walks into the clinic looking perfectly healthy, no symptoms, no complaints, just a routine check to be safe. An hour later, they walk out with a worried look and a test result that sounds a bit scary. Within a few weeks, they're on medication. The following month, another procedure, and before a year has passed, they're hospitalized, not because of the original problem, but because of complications from the treatment. This kind of story happens more than you think, because no matter how advanced modern medicine is, it still has limits, especially when applied to a body that's already been through 70+ years of life. Some test results change not because of disease, but simply because of age. Some abnormalities on a scan are just natural signs of getting older. But the failure to distinguish between aging and illness has led millions into unnecessary medical journeys. In today's video, we're going to highlight 5 medical tests that seniors over 70 should think twice about, not because they're immediately dangerous, but because they can trigger a domino effect that takes away what matters most: your peace of mind in old age. So stick around until the end, because knowing this early might save you from a long, stressful road of treatment, one you may never have needed in the first place. People often believe that getting the right diagnosis is the first step toward healing. But after the age of 70, sometimes the diagnosis isn't wrong, the problem lies in how it's understood and handled afterward. The truth is, there are things that may seem scientific and methodical, but are no longer suitable for a body that's in the final stage of life's journey. At that point, if we keep applying the same standards we used when we were younger, meaning more tests, aggressive treatments, and full-on prevention sometimes, that very approach ends up causing more harm than the illness we're trying to fight. Aging isn't just about the body getting weaker. It's a complete shift biologically, psychologically, and in terms of adaptability. A suspicious number on a test result for a 40-year-old might signal disease, but for a 75-year-old, it could very well be a completely normal sign of aging. And yet, unfortunately, many healthcare systems, even the most advanced, still confuse the two. They still apply the same procedures across all ages and all conditions. Still rely on machines, on images, on numbers instead of listening to the body of the patient. And so, from test results that aren't actually wrong, elderly people get led into long, drawn-out treatment journeys. Sometimes, it's taking pills every day even though they never felt unwell. Sometimes, it's an invasive procedure even though there were no symptoms. Sometimes it's surgery, chemotherapy, or even having part of their body removed just because of a blurry spot on a scan, or a number that was slightly off in a report. But what no one clearly says is this: those treatments were designed for people who are young, strong, and able to recover. For someone over 70, even a minor complication like kidney failure from medication, an infection after surgery, or chronic insomnia from anxiety can be enough to break them down. both physically and mentally. We're not here to oppose medicine, but medicine needs to be applied to the right person at the right time. Sometimes intervening too early, too aggressively isn't care, it's harm. Especially for older adults, every health decision should be weighed not just in terms of disease, but by asking, will this actually help them live better, happier, and more independently? Many elderly people today are living passively, handing over full control to doctors and lab results. They forget that they have the right to understand, to ask questions, to make choices. They can say no to a test if it doesn't feel necessary. They can ask for more time to consider, and they can choose to slow down, to live more gently instead of rushing to deal with things that may never even happen. What's sad is that society still sees treating thoroughly as a sign of love, but sometimes true love is knowing when to stop. It's asking questions instead of making assumptions. It's choosing quality of life rather than stretching out life at any cost. And that's exactly why we need to pause and reflect, not to distrust everything, but to be wiser, more clear-headed in every decision we make for our own aging journey or for our loved ones. Because at this age, sometimes a single wrong decision won't just worsen your health, it could steal away the precious piece you have left. And no test in the world can measure that. There are tests that seem harmless at first glance, even considered an essential part of routine health checkups for older adults. But after the age of 70, the body no longer functions like it did at 40. What used to be necessary might now become a burden. What once saved lives may now carry more risks than benefits. And the troubling part is most of us are never warned about this. Take the bone density scan, commonly known as DEXA, for example. Elderly people, especially postmenopausal women, are often recommended this test during routine visits. The results frequently come back, showing low bone density or osteopenia, a mild form of bone loss, not yet osteoporosis. And then, many are prescribed medication right away, most commonly bisphosphonates, a class of drugs designed to slow down bone loss. Sounds reasonable. But if we look deeper, there's a sad paradox. Most studies show that treating osteopenia in people over 70 doesn't significantly reduce fracture risk. Meanwhile, the side effects are clear and quite common, from esophageal ulcers, acid reflux, to the rare but serious risk of jawbone necrosis. So for a number that may not even be dangerous, the elderly are facing a chain of consequences they could have avoided. The second common test is the brain MRI, often ordered to assess memory. If someone over 70 says they're forgetful, distracted, or can't recall familiar names, doctors often suggest an MRI to rule out Alzheimer's or some form of dementia. However, what most people don't know is that nearly all MRIs in older adults show some kind of abnormality, such as white matter spots or mild hippocampal shrinkage. These findings can be frightening, even though they're normal signs of aging. And it's that fear that becomes the real danger, making patients anxious, lose confidence, withdraw socially, or fall into depression. Even worse, from an unnecessary MRI, they may be sent down a path of invasive tests like spinal taps, biopsies, or medications that affect the central nervous system even when their memory is completely within normal range based on basic cognitive assessments. What they actually need isn't machines, but better sleep, gentle movement, healthy relationships, and a lifestyle that nourishes clarity from within. Another test that seems helpful is the cardiac stress test. It's often recommended when an elderly person feels tired, short of breath, or just not as energetic as before. But after 70, the body no longer reacts to stress in the textbook way. Heart rate, blood pressure, and breathing all change with age. So the test results are often unclear or show a high rate of false positives. That means the test says there's a heart problem when there isn't. And from there, seniors may be sent for coronary angiograms, stent placements, or even open heart surgery invasive procedures with major risks. In many cases, their health doesn't improve afterward and sometimes even declines due to complications from contrast dyes, hormonal imbalances, or psychological trauma. Meanwhile, simpler tests like resting EKGs or calcium scans to assess arterial plaque can be enough to evaluate heart risk without forcing an elderly heart onto a treadmill. Then there's colonoscopy, the gold standard for detecting early colon cancer, but its effectiveness drops significantly after age 75. At the same time, the risks skyrocket. Anesthesia can cause prolonged confusion, bowel prep can lead to severe dehydration, and the risk of bowel perforation or arrhythmia is much higher than in younger people. One large study showed, out of 1,000 people over 75 undergoing colonoscopy, only 2 lives were saved by early cancer detection, but more than 20 suffered serious complications. In that context, non-invasive tests like the FIT fecal immunochemical test, a home stool test, have shown similar effectiveness without harming the body or psyche of the patient. Lastly, there's the full-body CT scan, often promoted as a way to catch cancer early. But few people realize that just one full-body CT exposes you to as much radiation as several hundred chest X-rays. In the elderly, this radiation doesn't just increase the risk of cell mutations, it also causes fatigue and results in vague findings like calcified nodules or harmless cysts, leading to anxiety, biopsies, and years of follow-up even when there's nothing serious. In many cases, the stress of chasing down these suspicious spots ends up draining the patient's health, spirit, and savings. The truth is, after age 70, what we need isn't checking everything thoroughly, but choosing what's truly useful. We should only do tests that are absolutely necessary when there are clear symptoms or when results will actually change the treatment plan. The rest, let the body live peacefully, in harmony with the natural aging process. Not everything that's detected needs to be fixed. Sometimes, letting go of what's unnecessary is the most responsible way to care for our health. Behind every number, every medical study, every rigid recommendation on paper is the real life of a real person. And sometimes, it's only when we listen to their stories that we truly understand the losses that a seemingly reasonable decision can bring. I'll never forget Mrs. Rose, a retired piano teacher, who walked into the clinic with a gentle smile, upright posture, and those soft, slender hands of someone who had spent her whole life with music. She had never fallen, had no bone pain, and still took morning walks. But during a routine checkup, her doctor suggested a bone density test just as a standard procedure. The results showed she had osteopenia, mild bone loss. Even though she had no symptoms, she was immediately prescribed medication for osteoporosis. Within 3 months, she started experiencing severe acid reflux, unexplained jaw pain, poor appetite, and constant insomnia. Sadly, during that time, she couldn't play the piano. Her fingers were numb, her throat dry from the meds. She no longer had the strength to teach, to play, or to sing the songs that once warmed her soul in her golden years. When I saw her again, she didn't blame anyone. She simply said one sentence that stayed with me. I should have asked more questions before I took something that made me lose who I was. Then there was George, a retired engineer who still enjoyed reading technical books and solving crossword puzzles every night. Like many older folks, he began forgetting little things. A few details, a neighbor's name, or mixing up a haircut appointment. His daughter got worried, took him to a neurologist, and he was sent for a brain MRI. The results showed some mild abnormalities, those white spots commonly found in elderly brains. From that day on, George was no longer himself. He feared he was losing his mind. He stopped driving, refused to go out, locked himself in his room. Every time he forgot something, he panicked. Every time he mixed up a name, he sank into despair. But a simple paper-based cognitive test later showed all his scores were normal. What he was experiencing wasn't illness, it was fear. And sometimes, that fear of being labeled sick is more devastating than any disease itself. And then there's Marcus, an 80-year-old man, strong and active, once a martial arts instructor for seniors. One day, he was invited to a premium full checkup package at a private clinic. He followed every recommendation, including a full-body CT scan. The scan showed a tiny 3mm nodule in his lung. No symptoms at all, but he was referred to oncology, got a PET scan, then a biopsy. The nodule turned out to be completely benign. But during the biopsy, part of his lung collapsed. He spent nearly a month in the hospital. He couldn't move the way he used to, lost muscle, lost energy. and most importantly, lost a confidence and mental clarity he once had. No one on his medical team made a mistake. They all followed proper procedures. But no one stopped to ask, was all of this really necessary for an elderly man who had been living healthy, independent, and happy? These stories aren't meant to blame medicine. They're meant to remind us that behind every test, every medical decision, there's a person. A person with routines, dreams, habits, and their own sense of peace. Even a small decision, if not appropriate, can take away something very big. Health isn't just about test results. It's about whether we can still live the life we want. And in old age, that matters more than ever. At a certain age, when the body begins to honestly reflect the marks of time, we no longer have the strength to redo past mistakes. And in healthcare, mistakes aren't always about negligence sometimes. They come from putting too much trust in numbers, in machines, in standardized procedures applied to everyone. The truth is, after 70, you don't have to do everything that's recommended. You have the right to choose, to ask again, to listen to your body with kindness and care. And more importantly, you have the right to say no if something doesn't help you live better. The solution isn't to turn your back on medicine. The solution is to understand its limits so that we use it as a tool for support, not a chain that binds us. Before every test, the simplest thing you can do is ask, if the results are abnormal, what happens next? What will I have to do? And will that actually help me be healthier, or will it just leave me anxious and lead to more interventions? If there's no clear answer, if the treatment doesn't clearly offer real benefits, then maybe it's worth considering postponing or not doing the test at all. Next, remember that prevention doesn't start in a hospital. It starts in the very home you live in. A deep sleep every night, a wholesome meal, a slow morning walk in the sunlight, a warm conversation with someone you love. Those simple things do more to prevent illness than any machine ever could. Instead of checking for peace of mind, live in a way that brings you peace. Instead of looking for abnormalities in test results, seek steadiness in your daily rhythm. Listen to your body, not with a stethoscope, but with inner awareness. When your body is tired, don't push it to do more. When your mind is foggy, don't force it to understand everything right away. Health in old age doesn't come from constant fixing. It comes from learning how to adjust your pace to match your true self. You also need to build a real relationship with your doctor. Not as someone who commands, but as someone who walks alongside you. A good doctor won't get upset when you ask too many questions. Won't rush you when you need time to think. Won't dismiss your worries just because that's the protocol. And if you feel disrespected in a clinic, find another place. A place where you're seen as a person, not just a bundle of test results. And finally, remember, old age is not a time to fight, it's a time to preserve. Each day isn't a quest to hunt down hidden diseases, it's a journey to protect your inner peace. You don't need to know every number in your body, you just need to know that you're eating well, sleeping soundly, walking steadily, speaking freely, and feeling like a whole human being. If a test causes you to lose those things, then no matter what it finds, it's not worth it. Because the ultimate goal of medicine isn't to detect everything. It's to help you live more meaningfully with the time you have left. And sometimes that comes from one very simple choice: to choose living instead of choosing more testing. To choose self-understanding over confusion from strange numbers. To choose to pause instead of being swept away in the whirlwind of screening to death. And that, perhaps, is the clarity we need most on the journey of health in old age. When we're young, health is often seen as the ability to do as much as possible, to push through every challenge, to keep moving forward without looking back. But at a certain age, usually after 60, and more clearly after 70, health is no longer about pushing a little harder, but about knowing when to stop. And it's exactly at that fragile line between keep going and pause that many people unintentionally lose their peace, all because of a test result. We're not denying the value of modern medicine, but like every other field, medicine is still learning every day. Tests that were considered essential at 40 may no longer be appropriate at 75. Numbers once labeled as risk when we were younger may actually be completely normal in a naturally aging body. And sadly, because people aren't fully informed, many go from a simple decision like just checking to be sure to an entire chain of consequences: long-term medications, invasive procedures, and a life filled with anxiety and dependence on the healthcare system, all unnecessarily. True health in old age doesn't come from knowing more and more, but from knowing how to filter what's truly helpful, what's unnecessary. Early detection isn't always a good thing, especially if it comes at the cost of your quality of life. Preventing illness at all costs isn't always wise if the prevention itself takes away your freedom, your spirit, and the peace that should come with aging. We need to learn to ask clearer questions before making medical decisions. We need to build the habit of listening to our body before rushing into tests. And most importantly, we need to ask ourselves, will this actually help me live healthier, happier, and more freely? If the answer is I'm not sure, maybe it's time to slow down. The deeper lesson here is, don't let fear trick you into doing what you don't need. Let knowledge, clarity, and self-respect guide every health decision you make. Because old age isn't a time to panic over illness. It's a time to live peacefully, with depth, and in tune with your body's natural rhythm. And how do you apply this in everyday life? Simple. Before agreeing to any medical test, ask your doctor the right questions. Take the time to read, learn, and reflect carefully. And above all, don't be afraid to ask. Because your health isn't just your doctor's responsibility, it's your own journey. Now, what about you? Have you ever gone through a medical test and later thought, maybe I should have thought twice about that? Share your thoughts in the comments below so we can all learn from each other's experiences. And if you found today's message meaningful, practical, and relevant, please hit the subscribe button for Life Tips After 60. Your support gives us the motivation to keep creating helpful content that truly speaks to the reality of aging. See you again in the next video.